I still remember the light coming through the stained glass window beside our front door. It was early morning, and the sun painted a splash of purples and yellows across the tile floor in the foyer. That soft mosaic, cheerful and bright, stood in jarring contrast to the chaos unfolding inside our home. My husband, Thomas Keller, was on the living room floor, his breath shallow, eyes fluttering, a sheen of sweat covering his face. His left arm twitched uncontrollably, like it had a mind of its own. In 26 years of marriage, I had never heard him make the sounds he made that day. At first, I thought it was his usual heartburn. He had a habit of brushing off the occasional chest discomfort as acid reflux. But this was different. He was in real trouble. I called 911 the moment it clicked that we were dealing with something deadly. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, monitor his breathing, and wait for the ambulance. I could hear the sirens already, and for a moment I felt something like relief. Help was on the way. Then something happened that even now sends a shiver straight through me. The ambulance arrived, lights flashing, and 2 paramedics jumped out, grabbing their gear. They made it as far as the walkway before they suddenly stopped. Frozen. I was already leaning out the doorway, yelling for them to come in. I thought maybe they saw something behind me, maybe something dangerous. But then I saw her. Gloria Stanford, the newly elected president of the Oak Ridge Trails Homeowners Association, was standing at the foot of the porch with a sheet of paper in her hand. She wasn't moving. She was holding the paper like it was a badge, tapping it with a single finger. "You can't enter the property," she said, her tone clipped like a school principal catching kids where they shouldn't be. I screamed, "He's having a heart attack. Get in here." One of the paramedics, tall, maybe mid-30s, name tag, said. Willis looked at me like I had 2 heads. His eyes flicked from my face to the paper in Gloria's hand and then to the gurney behind him. "Ma'am," he called out. "We're being told we're not allowed on the property without HOA clearance." I thought he had to be joking. They stood there, bewildered, paralyzed by a threat so ridiculous it almost didn't register. I begged them again. I even tried to wave them inside, ready to drag them in by their collars if I had to. But that stupid sheet of paper, the one Gloria kept pointing to, stopped them cold. It was a citation of Oak Ridge Bylaw 22C, something buried deep in their endless HOA rulebook. She quoted it like it was gospel. According to her, because we had a pending fine and were involved in an active landscaping violation dispute, no outside personnel, paramedics included, were permitted on the property without prior approval. I didn't know rules like that existed. If we had, Thomas and I would have fought it months ago. But nobody ever tells you these things until it's too late. Until the cost is life itself. Minutes passed. Not seconds, minutes. One of the paramedics even stepped back to the ambulance, likely calling dispatch to figure out what the hell to do. Meanwhile, I was kneeling beside my husband, trying to remember my CPR training from a decades-old first aid class. My palms pressed to his chest, counting compressions, whispering for him to hang on. His lips had turned pale, almost blue. I could feel his pulse weakening under my fingertips. Finally, mercifully, one of the paramedics muttered under his breath, "Screw this," and crossed the threshold. The other followed without a word. They pushed past Gloria, who screamed that she'd call the police. "Call whoever you want," I shrieked, not even recognizing the voice coming out of my throat. "Just help him." They dropped to their knees beside Thomas, opened their kit, and got to work: oxygen mask, defibrillator pads, chest compressions. I sat back, dazed, watching it all unfold like I wasn't even part of it. I remember thinking, they're here now. It'll be okay. They'll fix him. But by the time we reached the hospital, Thomas was in full cardiac arrest. He died on the operating table within the hour. I didn't cry. Not right away. Not that day. Everything inside me had gone hollow, brittle, like I was made of glass and one wrong move would shatter me. All I could see in my head was Gloria's smug face, calm and emotionless, as if the life of the man I loved was just another line item on her agenda. And I kept thinking to myself, this can't be legal. The coroner's report confirmed what I'd feared. Thomas had suffered a massive heart attack, yes, but it was survivable. The delay in receiving treatment was a likely contributing factor to the fatal outcome. That was the official phrasing. Likely contributed. That meant there was a chance, maybe even a good one, that he'd still be alive if they'd just been allowed inside. Gloria Stanford wasn't just a busybody HOA president anymore. She might as well have signed his death certificate. I was a widow at 52. I'd lived through all the HOA's petty game, the fines over mailbox height, the warning letters about our garbage cans, the endless squabbles about siding colors. But this was different. This was life or death. And they had chosen their stupid rules over a human life. That night, driving home from the hospital with the passenger seat empty, I made a silent vow I was going to fight them. I didn't yet know how big the battle would become, how many sleepless nights it would cost me, or that my personal heartbreak would eventually become national news. I just knew I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I woke up at 5 a.m. The next morning, out of habit more than anything else, still half expecting to find Thomas in the kitchen, brewing coffee and humming some old classic rock tune. The house felt cold and impossibly still. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't even especially tech-savvy. But rage has a way of making you learn quickly. I dove headfirst into the murky world of HOA bylaws and policy documents. There it was, Bylaw 22C, added quietly just 3 months earlier, in a barely footnoted section of the meeting minutes no one had even read. It allowed the HOA to deny access to outside contractors or non-essential third parties if a property was under formal dispute or the homeowner had outstanding citations. Apparently, they considered paramedics to be non-essential. We'd had a fine pending. A landscaping violation stemming from a rose bush that Thomas had planted 2 feet beyond the supposedly approved boundary. We were in the process of challenging it. The HOA had scheduled a hearing for the following month. But instead of waiting, they punished us. Punished him. And now he was gone. That same morning, the phone started ringing. First, it was neighbors offering condolences. Then local journalists sniffing around for details. A man had died of a heart attack while an HOA president kept first responders off his property. That's how they put it. It felt surreal, hearing our tragedy reduced to a headline. I didn't want the attention. But I realized quickly that it could be a weapon. A spotlight. And maybe, just maybe, a way to make sure it never happened again. The reporters showed up. Vans parked up and down our cul-de-sac. I gave a few carefully chosen words, just enough to spark outrage. Gloria tried to do damage control with a sterile press release, saying it was regrettable that an ongoing dispute led to confusion. She didn't even say Thomas's name. Just called him the homeowner. That same day, my neighbor, Richard Miles, came over. He was a retired attorney, always wore baseball caps and flannel, and used to talk fishing with Thomas on Saturday mornings. Through tears, he told me he'd seen part of it unfold from his upstairs window. The ambulance in the driveway. Gloria standing there, arms folded, like a bouncer at a nightclub. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, Richard said, his voice shaking. At first I thought maybe they were waiting for backup or something. Never crossed my mind they were being blocked. I broke down on the porch and he let me cry. When I was able to speak again, he looked me in the eye and said, "If you want to take legal action, I'll help you. What she did, that's not just unethical. It's criminal." And just like that, we had a plan. We gathered evidence. The text of the bylaw, the citation, statements from neighbors who saw it unfold, and, most importantly, the testimonies from the paramedics themselves, Willis and Dunn. They confirmed that they were told explicitly they were not allowed to enter the home. Dunn's quote, "We were warned we'd be trespassing." She said, and I quote, "This isn't your jurisdiction." The more we dug, the uglier it got. Email records showed that Gloria had spoken to other board members about making an example of us. One board member had replied, "But what if it's a real emergency?" Gloria's response, "They can sue us. We can't let people ignore the rules." When the district attorney saw those emails, the case shifted. This wasn't just a civil matter anymore. It became criminal. She was charged with involuntary manslaughter. The trial was surreal. Cameras everywhere. Journalists camped out like we were celebrities. Some people saw me as a symbol of justice. Other mostly HOA loyalists called me vindictive. I didn't care. I just wanted the truth to be heard. Gloria sat in the defendant's chair looking shell-shocked, like she couldn't believe her obsession with power had landed her in court. The jury didn't take long. The emails were damning. The testimonies from the paramedics heartbreaking. When the verdict was read, the courtroom went silent. Guilty. Afterward, in front of the courthouse, I stood before a sea of microphones and said the only thing that mattered: my husband, Thomas, deserved a chance to live. He didn't get that chance because someone chose to enforce a bylaw instead of honoring basic human decency. In the weeks that followed, the entire HOA board resigned. Oak Ridge Trails was left in chaos. But from that wreckage came something better. A new neighborhood association formed, smaller, leaner, and with one rule above all others: no bylaw will ever override a medical emergency. A year later, I took Thomas's ashes to the lake where we used to fish. Our son, Ryan, stood beside me. We scattered his ashes into the breeze, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Gloria Stanford remains in prison, her appeals denied. And across the country, other states have begun rewriting HOA laws to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Sometimes change is born from tragedy. And sometimes the legacy we leave behind is not the one we imagine, but the one that makes the world just a little bit safer for someone else.